Ike Ibeabuchi is set to return to the ring in December. Yes, you heard me right. Ike Ibeabuchi. If you're not familiar with him, he was a heavyweight contender from Nigeria, but based in the United States in the late 1990s. And he beat the likes of Chris Bird. And you have to bear in mind, Chris Bird beat Vitaly Klitschko. He beat Evander Holyfield and several other good fighters. Ike Ibeabuchi destroyed Chris Bird, hit him with a left uppercut. Slob was flying out of his mouth. He also gave David Tua the first loss of his professional career. Ibeabuchi, of course, won that fight on points. Very good fight. If you haven't seen it, I highly recommend it. Ibeabuchi went to prison in the very late 90s. He had mental health problems, so they say, because initially when he was supposed to stand trial, they deemed him unfit to stand trial. And they actually forcibly sedated him. So they put him in the loony bin. They injected him with all sorts of stuff because they said his mind wasn't right. And then a year or two later, then he stood trial. And Ibeabuchi basically was in the big house. He was in the slammer for the best part of 20 years. He came out briefly around 2014 or 2015, but he violated the conditions of his parole, so they sent him back in. And he did about another 6 years and came out in 2020. And so Ibeabuchi is now 51 years of age, and he's coming back and having a fight. This fight is happening in Nigeria. Not many major countries in the world would really license a 51-year-old who's been out the ring for however many years, 20 odd years. Certain states in America might, but most major countries are not going to license a guy this age. This is his BoxRec page here. He left boxing undefeated, 20-0. The opponent that he's going to be fighting is this guy right here, who's 4-10-1. They've given Ibeabuchi a pudding, as you would expect. A fighter of this age wouldn't be fighting anybody decent. And for those of you who don't know, Ibeabuchi is very active on his YouTube channel and has been since he got out in 2020 and was, I think, deported back to Nigeria. Judging by the way he talks on his YouTube channel, he still seems to me as crazy as a box of frogs, calling out all the top heavyweights from Usyk, Fury, Dubois. He's calling them all out. And his nickname, by the way, when he was fighting, was the President. He was a very promising heavyweight talent back in the late 90s. Very promising. In fact, I specifically remember an interview with Mike Tyson where he was asked about the upcoming heavyweights, people like Tua, Shannon Briggs, so on and so forth. And Mike Tyson actually said, and obviously Tyson was still fighting then. He was still a heavyweight contender at the time in the late 90s. And he said the only heavyweight coming up that he thinks would be a problem for him is Ike Ibeabuchi. That's what Mike Tyson said. So he thought that Ibeabuchi was the real deal. But as I say, unfortunately, Ibeabuchi got himself locked up for a very long time, 20 odd years. He's out now. And there's no doubt he still looks aesthetically in very good shape for a man of his age. Still very powerful, but now painfully slow. The athleticism isn't there anymore. You know, when Ibeabuchi was fighting, he had a lot of athleticism. Not just powerful, but he had good balance. He had pretty good hand speed. He could throw a ton of punches. He was extremely physically fit. I remember there was a story, and there were many stories about Ibeabuchi doing crazy stuff outside the ring. So, for example, there was one story where there was some type of meeting between Ibeabuchi, his management, promoters, TV execs, and they were talking about Ibeabuchi's career moving forward. And Ibeabuchi stood up, slammed his fist on the table, and insisted that everybody call him president. He's saying this to all the execs, and he's dead serious. And he had to be calmed down, apparently, by certain people there. He didn't want to be called Ike. He wanted to be called the president. And there was another story about when he sparred a guy called Ezra Sellers, who was a very useful cruiserweight back in the days. He fought Carl Thompson. If you've never seen Carl Thompson, Ezra Sellers, that's worth watching. Ezra Sellers was a very good puncher, a southpaw. And anyway, he was sparring Ibeabuchi one time, and Ibeabuchi ended up getting cut in the spar. And so after they had their sparring session, Ezra Sellers went to the changing room and he started changing and whatever. And Ibeabuchi saw this guy in the changing room and he had a ring on. And so Ibeabuchi said, "That's how you cut my eye." I mean, God knows how that works, right? Because the guy was wearing boxing gloves and wraps. But he was adamant that Ezra Sellers' ring that he was wearing on his finger, which Ezra Sellers says he didn't even have on, you know, when he was sparring, he only put it on afterwards. Ibeabuchi went absolutely crazy, apparently, and attacked Ezra Sellers in the gym, you know, wrestled him to the ground and started strangling him. And obviously, a bunch of people had to intervene and prize Ibeabuchi off Ezra Sellers to stop him strangling the guy. All right. And there was another story where Ibeabuchi was supposed to be catching a flight somewhere to, I think it was some type of boxing related event, maybe one of these conventions with the alphabet organizations. And Ibeabuchi got on the plane. But when he was on the plane, all of a sudden, I think the plane had maybe left. You know, it was taxiing towards the runway, and Ibeabuchi started screaming on the plane that there were demons on the plane and he was gonna die, right? He was gonna bring the plane down and all this kind of stuff. So he kicked up a massive stink, and I think they eventually took the plane back and let him off, and he was maybe arrested or something because he was going crazy on the plane, saying there was demons and all this type of stuff. So yeah, Ibeabuchi, a very eccentric character, apparently very intelligent. You know, he got a bunch of degrees or whatever in the prison, but definitely not the full biscuit.